Welcome to this week's UEN Capital Video Update. I'm Margaret Buckton, your UEN Executive Director. In this week's video, we're going to talk about the legislative cycle and enroll bills, important floor work that happened, some subcommittee action, what's coming up next, getting ready for the next funnel deadline, and advocacy actions for the week. I love this schoolhouse rock video from old Saturday mornings that I'm just a bill, and it very clearly points out all of the steps that a bill has to go through in order to become law. It's important at this time during the legislative session to check where things are and don't get too discouraged when something moves through one important benchmark. There's lots of time in many cases to continue working on it. Listen carefully for the status and check the enrolled bills list, which you can find on the legislative homepage down toward the bottom, and that will show you if a bill has actually made it to the governor's desk and whether it's pending the governor's signature, veto, or if she's actually signed it into law. Important floor work this week, we're going to talk about Senate File 251, which limits administrative expenditures, and then mention some others. So Iowa Code 279.45 limits school district general fund expenditures for executive administration to no more than 5%. Executive administration is defined as the cost of the school board and the superintendent's office. This bill that was floor managed by Senator Zahn would strike that executive administration reference and insert a new definition of administrative expenditures that would be school district purposes or activities that do not directly relate to student instruction or the activity of students, but instead support program delivery and development activities, including but not limited to with a laundry list of things. It applies to districts with more than 1,000 students. In addition to striking that reference of executive administration and the new definition, that including but not limited to would allow the Department of Education in their rulemaking process to add other things to that definition. The DE rules will take approximately 180 days and involve the State Board of Education. It is effective for budget years beginning on or after July 4th of 2024. Now, during the discussion in the Senate, there was reference to the Department of Education having discretion to create the definition that would make sense. Well, the language doesn't say they may include. It says including but not limited to, which means the DE can add more things to the definition of administrative expenses, but they can't delete what's already in the language. 5% is already in law, so that isn't much change. Well, not exactly. The current law is very tight with that executive administration definition, and that's a known definition that the National Commission on Education Statistics uses, and it's consistent across the nation. Senator Zahn distributed a spreadsheet that he said was the impetus for this bill. It shows the change in FTEs from fiscal 93 to fiscal 21, and he refers to it as the FTE surge. It compares for every district in the state what is seen here on this statewide summary, that students increased statewide by 9% during that time, total staff up by 41%, but disproportionately the staff increase was in all other staff as compared to the teacher category. I think the most important question about this is why? What is the difference since 1993? There have been all kinds of mandates, emphasis on student needs and safety that have been much of the justification for the change in staffing. We have special education least restrictive environment and integration in the classroom, and we have paraprofessionals that we didn't have before. We have teacher leadership and compensation positions mandated by the state to make sure we had support for teachers and improve instruction. We have school resource officers, behavior specialists, truancy staff, and interventionists, all kinds of folks that are working on making sure that students with extreme needs are being handled and the rest of the staff and students are safe. We've had an explosion of data system requirements, 8th grade career plans, student information systems, your FAST assessments, your statewide assessments, data and reporting, online purchasing, licensure and training tracking, evaluation, training for all of these systems, and we might have more if the governor's plan for curriculum materials and library e-catalogs is passed. Helping our House members understand the change in staff and what's precipitated that is one of the most important things in stopping this bill from moving forward. So some resources to help you with that. The National Council of Education Statistics is responsible for defining expenditure terms and things that are reported consistently for all states to report up to the federal government level. And they've got a better definition of school administration expenses. Now, this would be a combination of those executive administration and school administration expenses. That would be broader than what we currently have, but it's tighter than what's in Senate File 259. But even according to this tested definition used by the federal government in data reporting, not a single school district in Iowa is currently below 5%. We have a spreadsheet of that data for your district that will show in your weekly handout. So make sure you look at your weekly report for that information. The NCES definition excludes student and staff support and services and operations, all of which would be defined as administrative by Senate File 251. Now, the work of administration is complex and critical to the success of every school and student. Finding that right balance is the goal of every school board and community. Some final thoughts. Setting a benchmark before having a baseline is bad policy. We ought to set that definition and then have every district see where they are and then determine where is the goal that districts should strive to meet. According to U.S. Census data in 2020, Iowa schools spend $19 per pupil less than the national average on combined school and district administration. We also know that administrators and other staff are filling many roles that are related to instruction or other essential services, everything from substitute teaching to driving school buses to coaching. In your district, figure out how all of your executive staff are helping with those shortages in your district. We also are a little bit worried that if a bill like this passes, documentation to comply will require complex reporting, maybe even timesheets, for every administrator and support employee that's not providing direct instruction to make sure that you can capture the work that is allowed to be counted. Next step, the Iowa House Education Committee will get the bill. They'll be assigned a subcommittee, watch for a call to action on Senate File 251, and contact all House members. Other floor action this week: House File 608, seizure plans and training, and House File 610, excused absences, were both approved unanimously or nearly so in the House, moving them over to the Senate. We're registered opposed to both of those. Senate File 398, a robotics program, would have the Department of Education provide resources and technical assistance. That was approved unanimously in the Senate, sending it to the House. House File 632 would allow cybersecurity costs to be paid from the SAVE Fund. That was approved unanimously. And House File 370, IASB's Technical Cleanup and Modernization Bill, also approved in the House, sending it to the Senate. We support both of those. And then lastly, House File 622, school bathrooms based on gender on the birth certificate. That was passed in the Senate, in the House, to match the Senate version. They sent Senate File 482 back to the Senate, which will send it on to the governor. We're registered opposed to that. There were 3 subcommittee actions this week that relate to the teacher shortage, and we are registered in support of all 3 of these bills. There's Senate File 392, Teacher Recruitment Omnibus. This includes the ability to use management funds for teacher recruitment and retention if you're not also having an early retirement that year. Then House File 355, Permanent Teacher License. That one would allow our 10-year teacher veterans with advanced degrees to not have to go through continuing education units anymore. Both of those were passed in their respective subcommittee of their House Ways and Means Committee. House File 256, the minimum licensure age, would give the BOEE authority to give licenses to 18-year-olds or older if all other conditions are met. And that was approved by a subcommittee of the Senate Education Committee, and we support that too. Coming up next, more bills from a chamber have to get to the other side and get out of a committee by the next funnel deadline, which is March 31st. We expect the list to get smaller as we go. Your advocacy actions: Senate File 251, administrative expenditure limitations. Contact your House members, both Republicans and Democrats, and encourage opposition. Watch for a call to action to give you some supports for that. House File 430, mandatory reporter bill. We're still asking the Senate Education Committee to fix the makeup of the Board of Educational Examiners, which was changed over on the House side to be half represented by parents. And then continue to talk about other priorities. We've had some momentum on preschool and poverty study proposals, and they will be alive to start the next session, but don't wait till then to talk about how preschool and poverty are impacting students in your school, and then all of the teacher shortage and flexibility bills on the list. Thanks to our UEN corporate sponsors. We appreciate their support and connection to urban school districts. Check out the corporate sponsorship page on our UEN website for more information about how to access their services. And if you have a company or service that you think would be supportive of urban schools and like to connect, send them our way. Learn more by accessing the UEN legislative website. You can get issue briefs, legislative updates, links to these videos, calls to action, and advocacy resources. Thanks for all you do in advocating for the students in your school. We'll see you next week.